What makes horror movies so addictive? The human brain is literally wired to be addicted to horror movies. Scientists have discovered that the same chemical reaction that makes you terrified is also making you crave more. But here's the thing. This addiction isn't just psychological. Your body is physically changing while you watch these films. And the most disturbing part? You're actually enjoying these changes. In this video, I'll reveal the 3 biological mechanisms that make horror movies so addictive, and why some people can't stop watching, while others can't even start. The third reason shocked even the researchers who discovered it: the paradox of fear. Let's be honest, fear feels terrible. Your heart races, your palms sweat, your muscles tense. So why would anyone voluntarily subject themselves to 2 hours of pure terror? The answer lies in your brain chemistry. When you're scared, your body releases a cocktail of chemicals: adrenaline, dopamine, and endorphins, the exact same chemicals released during extreme sports or roller coaster rides. Dr. Margie Kerr, a sociologist who studies fear, explains it perfectly. The biological response to fear and excitement is actually the same. Your body is preparing for fight or flight, and the distinction between pleasure and fear comes from your cognitive interpretation. But here's what makes horror movies different from actual danger. You know you're safe. This creates what psychologists call controlled fear. All the excitement with none of the actual risk. The excitation transfer effect. But that's just the beginning. The second mechanism is something scientists call the excitation transfer effect. And it explains why horror movies can actually improve your mood. When a scary movie ends, that arousal doesn't immediately disappear. Instead, it transfers to whatever you feel next. So when the credits roll, and you feel relief that the danger has passed, that leftover arousal amplifies your positive emotions. This is why people often laugh after being scared. That residual excitement transforms into euphoria. It's also why horror movies can make for surprisingly good date nights. A study from the University of British Columbia found that people who watched scary movies together reported stronger feelings of attraction afterward compared to those who watched other genres. The shared experience of fear creates a unique bond. But this doesn't work for everyone, which brings me to the most fascinating part: the dark personality trait connection. The third mechanism is the most surprising, and it might explain why some people are horror fanatics while others avoid the genre entirely. Recent research from the University of Oklahoma discovered a strong correlation between enjoyment of horror movies and what psychologists call the dark tetrad personality traits: psychopathy, sadism, narcissism, and Machiavellianism. But before you worry about your horror-loving friends, there's an important distinction. People with higher levels of these traits aren't necessarily dangerous. They simply process fear differently. Dr. Colton Scrivener, who studies morbid curiosity at the University of Chicago, found that people with these traits experience less empathy for victims in horror movies, allowing them to enjoy the suspense and creativity without the emotional distress. Meanwhile, highly empathetic people often find horror movies unbearable because they too strongly identify with the suffering on screen. The horror sweet spot. So what makes the perfect horror movie? The most addictive horror films hit what I call the horror sweet spot. They are threatening enough to trigger your fear response, but controlled enough that you can still enjoy the experience. This explains why different horror subgenres appeal to different people. Some prefer supernatural horror because the threats aren't realistic. Others enjoy psychological thrillers because they're intellectually stimulating. The most successful horror franchises understand this balance perfectly. Take The Conjuring universe, which has grossed over $2 billion worldwide. These films combine jump scares for immediate arousal with atmospheric dread for sustained tension. The pandemic effect. Interestingly, during the COVID-19 pandemic, viewership of pandemic-themed movies like Contagion skyrocketed by over 4,000%. This seems counterintuitive. Why would people watch scary movies about pandemics during an actual pandemic? The answer lies in something psychologists call morbid curiosity. Horror movies allow us to mentally rehearse threatening scenarios from a safe distance. They're like emotional training simulations. A 2021 study found that horror fans showed greater psychological resilience during the pandemic. Their previous exposure to fictional catastrophes had prepared them for real-world anxiety. The addiction cycle. So here's how the addiction cycle works. You watch a horror movie, experience the thrill of fear in a safe environment. Enjoy the dopamine rush, feel the euphoria when it ends, and then seek out that experience again. Over time, you may develop a tolerance, needing increasingly intense films to get the same effect, just like any other addiction. But unlike harmful addictions, this one might actually be good for you. Research suggests that controlled exposure to fear can help build emotional resilience and reduce anxiety over time. Why some people can't watch? If you're someone who can't stand horror movies, there's nothing wrong with you. Your brain might be more sensitive to threat stimuli, or you might have higher empathy levels. Some people also have what psychologists call thin mental boundaries. They have trouble separating fiction from reality on an emotional level, making horror movies feel too real. The future of fear as technology evolves, so does horror. Virtual reality horror games create an even more immersive fear experience, potentially amplifying the addictive qualities. Researchers are now studying how these more immersive experiences affect our psychology, with some suggesting they could eventually be used as exposure therapy for anxiety disorders. Conclusion. So what makes horror movies so addictive? It's a perfect storm of biological, psychological, and personality factors, creating an experience that's terrifying, yet satisfying. Your brain gets the thrill of danger with none of the actual risk, creating a unique form of entertainment that's been captivating humans since we first gathered around campfires to tell scary stories. But I'm curious, are you a horror fan or do you avoid scary movies at all costs? Let me know in the comments below. And if you found this video interesting, check out my analysis of why we're fascinated by true crime stories. The psychological mechanisms are surprisingly similar, yet distinctly different. Thanks for watching, and remember, that fear you feel during horror movies isn't just normal. It might be exactly why you keep coming back for more.